12 o'clock and it's time to switch to a bit of enterprise search. And Steve Sale from AstraZeneca, I'd like to bring into play.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you can indeed. Hello, Steve. Welcome to this wonderful conference. Though I think you've certainly you spoke before, didn't you? A few years ago.
Not here. I think.
Oh, okay.
A couple of other conferences. Yeah.
Okay, so Steve's at AstraZeneca, which is a company that, for various reasons, including a wonderful new headquarters in Cambridge, is very newsworthy. But Steve sits behind the firewall. Steve, you'd like to tell us what you've been doing over the last couple of years, coping with pandemics and information retrieval?
Yeah. So yeah, we won't go into the vaccines and the pandemic specifically, but shy away from that subject a little bit. Yeah, I'm here to talk about the well, being able to search across the enterprise, and if I can try and share my screen. If you can see that.
It's coming. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I work for AstraZeneca. I'm a senior architect in the search and taxonomy team, and we're part of global IT and provide search services for the organisation as a whole. AstraZeneca, most have perhaps heard through the news, we're a pharmaceutical company. It's a global organisation with around sort of 65, I think, 1,000 users. And yeah. So with search, I kind of want to start really about why I'm talking about enterprise search really, and why that's different on the internet. And I've recently been on a course, weirdly, where oh, not work. Won't work. Yeah, where a quote came up, which kind of resonated massively with every day at work, looking at search around the fact that every complex problem there's an answer that's clear, simple, and wrong. And the most common one I think I hear pretty much every day, and anyone else in search, is that enterprise, I can't find what I want. Enterprise search is rubbish. Just get Google. Which I don't want to, taken away from what Google do. And in the context of this, they're talking about Google.com, obviously, and going out and searching the internet rather than GCP services and so on. And it's a fair statement from a user as well. They're really good at searching the internet and find stuff. Why can't we just use that in the enterprise? Enterprise and internet search are two very big problems. And there's an illustration around that, which I think actually, Martin, I might have heard from yourself originally, thinking back, was around why can I not click through anything? Is if I wanted to go and bake a cake, then I can go to the internet, into Google, and I can search recipes for birthday cake. And there will be a whole list of different recipes that come up. I can look through for something that looks achievable for my baking skills. There's nothing too exotic in there in terms of ingredients. And I can go and make a cake, and if kids are happy, job done. Google's done a wonderful job. It's just solved the problem and given me the answer straight away. The difference with that and going into work is that I might then go and do a search for, well, I want to be able to know about maternity leave policy. Well, search could give me loads of policies around maternity leave because it's different in every country. It's different for different people and so on. So the one that I want is actually the one for the UK, for me as a father as opposed to a mother, because that can be slightly different for the fact that I'm office-based as opposed to maybe in a factory. So I'm after a very specific and targeted result. And the expectation from a user is that I get that result, not just the generic answer that will help me solve a generic problem. There's a few other big areas of difference, and it all comes down to data. So on the internet, if I go and create a web page, the first thing I think about is how do I get that to the top of Google? So I'll produce a web page, it'll go on the internet, it will have a URL that's registered to DNS, that internet search engines can go and look up, list of addresses. And there's a whole industry around SEO, so search engine optimization, where you can work with partners to be able to get your page to, ranking much higher in Google, Bing, and so on. At work, create a document, I'll go and store it in a file because I know where it is, but very few people will ever think about how do I get that to the top of enterprise search? And I know where it is. And actually, it's slightly worse because we also have SEO within the enterprise, but rather than search engine optimization, it's more of search engine obstruction, where some users, for whatever reason, will go and actively hide content rather than from searching being able to find it for one reason or another, and that can cause problems as well. Of course, there's then different file types on the internet where your web page has to be something that a browser can use. So you've got a defined constraints around what your page will look like, how to read it, how to interpret it, and so on. Whereas with Office documents, there's a massive range of different formats. They can all be stored in different systems, whether it's SharePoint or Box or Workday, which all need an individual way of looking at that or being able to extract information from it, and then the security problems and so on around being able to have access to it in the first place. And then, of course, it's sort of described as the whole retrieval problem and the expectation from a user. So the first area to look at with searching the enterprise actually is around, and largest problem is around data. And when you talk to a business around what their data looks like and to help explain it, the illustration that almost comes out from that description is something along these lines, where we know exactly where everything is. It's all just here. It's all been nicely categorized and it's sorted and it's all lovely. But the stark reality and the awkward conversation you then have to have with the business is around the fact that actually, while that might be true for some content, the vast majority of content is probably better represented by this. We've just got stuff dumped everywhere. It's in boxes. It'll be randomly put on a shelf. Rather than the doors at the back being open as they are in here, they're usually locked, so you can't even get into the cupboard in the first place to see what's in there and have a rummage. So there's a few challenges here, and again we come back to a very clear and simple answer that is often wrong. And the response when you start to talk about that is just fine. What we'll do is we'll just go and get AI. And well, yeah. Unfortunately, there isn't just, and I'm hoping maybe somebody here can tell me otherwise, but there isn't just an AI tool that you can go and deploy to an organization that will go and classify your content, sort it, organize it, and make that available to you. Instead, what we have to do is break that down into individual problems and start to look at, rather than describing it as AI to the business and to users, we start to talk more around machine learning. And so we're taking a lot of this content and trying to break down the problem of just having an endless supply of swamp, if you like, to be able to classify content, being able to separate content that may be scientific versus manufacturing or commercial, HR, IT, and so on. Being able to detect the sensitivity and the privacy of content and the security maybe that's applied to that. And do we have content? Maybe we have somebody's CV that's just dropped somewhere that's open to absolutely everyone to view, whereas maybe that should be locked down. Being able to extract content from multimedia, image tagging. So you come back to Google and use things like Google Vision to be able to tag content within an image. Being able to do OCR scanning or transcribing content on audio from a video. And then extracting something that's really important is quite often looking at search, enterprise search, the assumption is we'll just bring back a list of documents. But actually, what people are trying to get to usually is a part of a document, particularly in a regulatory space, where I don't just want to be pointed back to that specific document. What I want is a paragraph from that document that's relevant to the question I'm trying to answer at the moment. So we can't do it for everything, but for critical information, critical or known documents, regulated documents, there are sections in there that we can detect and extract that section. So now, rather than just returning the document, we can say, well, here's the document, but of that, there's this extract, section of this document that's probably the bit that you're after, and giving that answer straight away in search rather than just pointers to documents. But there's also, which often gets overlooked, is that actually a lot of rule-based natural language processing is still highly relevant and important to being able to sort the mess and access content and sort that. Being able to do named entity recognition and tag a document with diseases or genes or manufacturing sites and so on. Being able to look at sentence co-occurrence and analyze that in a bit more detail. So from a scientist point of view, maybe doing some research into genes and proteins, genes and a disease maybe. But it's all well and good that a document mentions this disease and this gene in the same document, but if they're on pages apart, it's probably not relevant. The fact that it's in a sentence together suddenly makes that a lot more interesting. And you'll find that the same combination appears all the time, because asthma and lungs, for instance, is an obvious, well, there'll be loads of content that mentions that relationship. But if there's a relationship that's only mentioned once, that's slightly out of kilter really with the rest of the content, then as a scientist doing some research, that's quite interesting. Actually, well, why is there that outlier, and is that something that's just irrelevant, or is there something behind that? Being able to help with did you mean, so spellings and so on in query, and also being able to understand query intent and what the user is actually trying to do. So we can then string all of this together to help with organising our content. So we'll start off with our storeroom of endless content. We can start to apply some of the machine learning models around that to be able to split it out and organise it into a high-level categories, maybe between product content or legal content, meeting minutes, and so on. And then start to apply logical rule-based analysis to that. So something that we tripped over with quite a lot at the start is around the fact that we just said, well, we want to do named entity recognition and we'll apply it across all of our content. But that starts to have problems, because where you have, so for genes, there's a gene for, I think it was a gene referred to as IIS. But then within a lot of IT content, there's also Internet Information Services in Windows, which is referred to as IIS. So you then start to filter on a gene, and all of a sudden you select IIS, and all of a sudden you have all of this IT content come back in a scientific context, which just broke everything. So being able to apply the right rules, the right entity recognition, the right analysis to the right type of content and the relevant type of content is critical to be able to give a good result at the end. And then obviously we can then apply the outcome of that to filter and improve relevance and organisation for the organisation to get the right information when they need it. With enterprise search, we will take a habit. Well, when that's first deployed, you usually do this as a kind of an initial one-size-fits-all, and most organisations might stop there. where you then end up with almost a single persona. There's one relevance model that's applied, and you try to manage that and tune that to be able to give the right result for a user. You have a similar set, the same set of filters that will be available to everybody, regardless of the context. And the way that you present the information back to the user, the format, the styling, and so on will be exactly the same. And that's okay to begin with when you're first deploying an engine and you are starting to build up content and try and understand what the users really want to need. But particularly with large organizations and global organizations, the reality is that there is no one size fits all, because there's such a diverse range of user groups, whether that's in geographical splits and cultural splits, maybe about age, organizational differences between science and operations, commercial, IT, and so on. And so having that one size fits all suddenly starts to look a little bit odd, really, within an organization like that. And we can see that in the way users search. And often you'll find that users will, similar on Google really, is that a lot of people will search for using a single term. So a user searching for, say, Brilinta as a drug will give one set of results back to everybody, because that's our relevance model. But actually, in science, I want to know more about what the compound is for that. What's the effect that drug is having on the body, and how does it work? Whereas in manufacturing, maybe I want to know more about actually how do I make it, and where are the manufacturing lines for that, and how do they work, and so on. In marketing, commercial, I'm more after the marketing information and the sales information. So we've introduced personas into the system, and to be able to give a more responsive relevant model, more responsive relevance model, to be able to tackle some of these issues and give the more bespoke response in terms of results to science versus commercial or operations, or maybe based between users in the UK versus Japan will have a very different set of relevance criteria. The filtering that's provided to you in those results will also change. So science, having more scientific-based filters around genes, proteins, diseases, and so on, versus manufacturing or commercial, where you might have more information around marketing or sites and markets or sites, and so on. Also, actually, the way that we present the information back is also really important. Scientists tend to be, it's a very broad stereotype, but will be much more into a structured data set of going, well, give me a table of results with all of the detail and that I can read through, being able to provide the scientific labels that have come out from named entity recognition that apply to a particular document, and so on. Whereas marketing commercial may be a little bit more visual and want more of a visual representation of content, and the information about even the same document that they're interested in and that needs to be presented back and how it's presented back will vary slightly. So being able to have the user interface to respond to those personas and the information that it presents back and how it presents is just as important as the relevance model and the filtering and some of the functionality that's provided as well. That said, it's enterprise search. It's trying to be the one search facility for the organization. And one of the personas works for describe really, I suppose, your core business, your core job description, if you like, of maybe doing some research as a scientist. Next minute, you might maybe go for a coffee and start thinking about your summer holidays. Come back and go, well, actually, I want to be able to, I need to go and book some time off. So how many days holiday have I got left? And where do I book the holiday? So book my time off. So you start looking for HR systems, or maybe you start looking at something else. Maybe wanting to report a fault with a laptop or whatever, looking at IT equipment. There's nothing that indicates, when I'm using personas, that all of a sudden the user switched from sort of core job description search to more enabling search and being able to find this other content that's more generic around being able to actually perform your role. And so now you're looking for how to log a ticket for IT, or you're looking for where to book your annual leave, and you're getting back documents that's giving you scientific filters and scientific presentation and metadata tags, which doesn't really fit. And this is where we start looking back towards rule-based and machine learning to be able to help us understand what it is the user's asking for, and being able to interpret the rather than applying where we're applying machine learning and rule-based rules at index time as we ingest content. We're now looking at how we can apply that to the actual query text that the user's submitting. Doesn't work really for searching for a single term, but where users are being a little bit more verbose, then you can start to pull out more understanding and be able to dynamically, without the user being aware, maybe switch persona, or even take the user to a slightly different technology in the background, even though we present it back through the same interface. As a search result, it might actually have come from a different, maybe if you ask for how much holiday have I got left, can we pull that back from Workday, from the HR system, to give you the live current feed. We've also needed to take a slightly different approach to the way that we build and deliver search to the user. Traditionally, we end up with this kind of all roads lead to search problem, where in SharePoint you might have a link to be able to, in SharePoint you might have a search box. The same in Nucleus. Nucleus is our internal intranet, and there'll be a search box on there, and you can enter your search term. When you do that and hit go, it then takes you out of SharePoint or out of Nucleus and so on, and into the enterprise search user interface, or where you may have a link to within search. We've been able to pull data together into 360 views around a drug, and this is everything we know about this drug, or this is everything we know about clinical study. Being able to provide links to those. So the slide I think I've missed somewhere, but anyway, and it, from maybe from a workplace article, there's a link to, well, here's the information we know about this study, or we know about this drug. But each time it's breaking the workflow that the user has, because you're in the middle of doing something and it jumps you out now to search, and now you've got to take yourself back to where you were before and get back into that workflow. So we started to look at actually how do we deliver the insight and search facility and richness to the user at the right place at the right time, but without breaking that workflow, and without them having to go to search, but instead actually bring that insight and that information to the user. So what we've done to be able to deliver that, search is available through an API. So you could go and build your own interface if you want to for a particular application, but most projects aren't really interested in necessarily doing that. They just want to consume the service. So we've taken enterprise search in our user interface and broken it up into its constituent parts and into a series of small web parts and components. These all together still provide enterprise search as a service that you can go to, but by being able to break that up and provide it as a series of small micro web apps or web parts, then actually we can now start to embed those. So whereas before we were taking all roads to search, it's the other way around now, where search is taken to these applications. So in Nucleus, the intranet, you might go and have a look at a news article. And on the right-hand side next to the news article, there's then a little panel, which is just part of the search user interface. That's been embedded in there, that then brings back other related articles or documentation and so on. from the study 360s, we've broken those down into individual elements. So maybe there's some metrics around a study about how many patients are enrolled or what status that studied up to, and so on. Well, that web part again can be put onto an article within Nucleus, or if you've got a web page within SharePoint around a particular study, again, you can embed these components. And it's all about being able to take the original mess and swamp of data, organize that, gain insight from it, categorize it, and so on, and then deliver that back to the user where they are when they need it, rather than yeah. And so that's kind of that brings me to the end of there, really. Thanks very much. I'm going to say if there are any questions, but I think we'll cover them after Martin.
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed, Steve. It's clearly a continuing journey. I mean, I think you'll agree, because we've talked about this, that search isn't a project that you just, oh, we've got there. Is that, yeah. I mean, you and your team have been working on ever since I think I was at school. You seem to have been doing this a long time. Well done.
Yeah, so I've been here 6 years, and it's definitely but the guys have been working on it since long before then as well.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, yeah, it's a initiative rather than a project. It's never finished.
Okay, so if I can now share my screen. There we go. Right, I didn't know until 7 o'clock last night that John Weston wouldn't be giving his presentation today. So this is unrehearsed, so bear with me, folks. A little bit about me, don't worry too much about that, except I've been working in search since 1975. I have been at it a long time. So enterprise search, we've been doing it for 70 years, and we still can't make it work. So, and if you look at this, these two parallel tracks, basically up to the end of the 1980s, it was very much a document retrieval environment. Since the 1990s, it's been much more, the research is a lot more about sort of the web environment and what I'll call generic search. And if you want to get a sense of how far back it goes, this is a 1951 master's thesis, which is the first document I found, which actually looks in depth, though not that much depth, about how computers could be used to search text. I don't think there's any other enterprise application that has a longer history. But as I say, we still can't get it right. We talk about the search box. Here's a search box. And by and large, we are quite content in enterprises just to leave it inside the box. We really don't want to play with it too much. And that's a great shame. We compartmentalize it, stick it somewhere. We've got search. What we mean is we do have a search box. We have no idea what is going on behind the search box. We don't know what it's searching. We don't know whether to trust the results we see. It's all a bit of a mystery, but it doesn't matter. We've got search. I want to look at 3 tipping points over the next 20 minutes, which I think are very important in the evolution of enterprise search. And Steve's done a great warm-up on this. I didn't know what he was going to talk about, and he didn't see this until after he'd written his slides. But you'll find that great minds think alike. Going back on history, yeah, we've been doing AI. This is 1975. We started to look at what the role of AI was in retrieval systems. This is not new. And yet it comes up as though it's new and magical and no one else has thought about it and whatever. And of course, if you read the vendor PR, this is what AI delivers. It's infinitely superior to keyword search, and it understands text and personalizes search outcomes. Isn't it just wonderful? And if you read the vendor pitches, they're all about, we have AI You don't have to worry about anything else. And then I come along. Now, by and large, machine learning has to take the past to try to foretell the future. But what past is being used and what future are you actually looking at? If it is infinitely superior, why hasn't anyone published some studies about here it is on and here it is off? It understands the meaning of text. I'll come back to this in a moment, but a great deal of NLP research just uses English language training collections, and they are general purpose training collections. They don't contain, for example, as Olivia was talking about this morning, 300,000 different ways of defining a disease. Steve's already alluded to this, this whole question of personalization. You have multiple roles in a company. You may be a research scientist. I'm a chemist by training. I may want to look up something deeply chemical, but am I looking it up for me or am I looking it up for a team? And what's the role of that team and what's their objectives? It may be different. I may be in several different teams. I may also be working on an internal study on relocating the research department. Let's move it from Macclesfield. I know, let's go down to Cambridge. And this is one of the big issues. In the enterprise, you have multiple roles. So how does AI work out what the intent of your search is? And crucially nowadays, if it's going to help you make more informed decisions, how are you going to look inside that black box and understand actually what the algorithms are? And of course, AI improves productivity. And of course, we all measure productivity. Every single company measures every single aspect of its work in terms of productivity. No, it doesn't. And yet this is the business case. It improves productivity. And of course, it's going to do these wonderfully high precision searches. Steve was talking about the diversity of content at AstraZeneca. If you've got a large pharma company, one I work with had 500 million documents. Amazingly, most of them are about the same stuff. Getting the relevant items out when you've got all those documents is extremely difficult. And if we're just going to use AI, that search box has now become a black box. And, oh, that's fine. That's fine. Let's use the technology. Except we have a problem. This is a survey from Intranet, which is a Danish consulting company. And they surveyed 230 Scandinavian organizations. If Katrina's there, I'm sorry about the missing N. And 40% of users inside these companies are dissatisfied with their internal search functionality. And another 30% of organizations, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. Only 1 in 5 organizations is delivering quality search to users. Is that really good enough? Are we happy with that? I don't think we should be. So what are the causes of search dissatisfaction? There was a brilliant paper by Paul Cleverly and Simon Burnett, dating back about 4 years ago now. That's the DOI, which basically said there are 3 causes of search dissatisfaction. One is the content, because as Steve is saying, it's no information in the enterprise is formatted for it to be found. People just want to send it out to people they know are interested. So, or attach it to an email, of course. Training is a big issue. Search is not intuitive. You have to know an awful lot about the content, how it's indexed, how to use the technology. You may have multiple technologies. And very rarely does a company invest in training. It very rarely invests in the search team. And then there's the technology, which perhaps is not working as well as it could. The interesting thing about search applications is when they fail, you don't know why they failed. Is it the content's not in there? Is that the indexing is poor? Is that you're looking at the wrong repository? Now, this is a very rare example of research into enterprise search. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. But just to illustrate this complexity of content, it's difficult to cope with this. On the right-hand side, This is from the Internet Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, which looks at some of the categories of information in their main database. Every single one of those products, knowledge products, has different metadata schemes. It's used for different purposes. Some of it's internal, some of it's external. And by the way, it's in 3 languages. It's in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. So that gets pretty complicated. And then you have a language problem, which is never considered in the research. If you look at this panel, at this table on the left-hand side, this is this pharma company, 500 million documents. It's a German company. 73% of the content's in English, but only 24% of the people using the search application have English as their first language. So when they do a search, they have a big problem because they might not have the synonyms. They might not have, there's a lot about, we use natural language questions. But if German's your first language, you may not be able to write the optimum English sentence to search English content, a topic that's never discussed. And as Steve was saying, you have a range of personas. Each of them have different objectives, have different backgrounds, have different commitments to the work they're doing, perhaps. It does happen. But let's look at research and enterprise search. If you'll humor me a moment, there are about 100,000 papers on generic information retrieval, and they date back to 1957. There are about 70,000 or so in the new search anthology, IR anthology, that's just been released. So there's a huge amount of research, but it's at a generic level. A lot of it's about web, a lot of it is about using track collections and things like this. That's the number of enterprise search papers, around about 50, that are doing quite detailed organizational specific research, as Katrina was talking about at the opening of this conference. Now, when you consider how many people are using enterprise search and the impact on the world economy of them doing so, don't you think we should be doing a bit more research into optimizing it? So the role of AI in search, I think, is a big tipping point. If we don't grasp that, how are we going to progress? But then you have the challenges of actually implementing search. This is a sort of schema I share with people about how they're going to improve their search. It starts at business strategy. It looks at decisions and risks. I don't look at tasks. I look at decisions and risks because these have an impact on the business. And very few people look at risks, but a lot of what search is about is minimizing risk. Then you design the user requirements, the user interface, invest in the team. And then you have 3 options. You can boost what you have and see whether people are satisfied, or you can go and build or buy another application. And you've got a big list. This may come as some surprise to find there are around about 70 search software companies in the world. And I'm sure this is not a complete list. Now, what is interesting about search at the present moment is that Microsoft has a dominant mind share. Yeah, we've got search, it's embedded in Microsoft. But let's take Azure away for a moment. O365 Search is a module of O365. It's not an enterprise level search application. What it does, it supports folder discovery, it does personalization, it tells you what others are looking at and things like this. But you wouldn't want to use O365 to look at 500 million documents, a lot of which are deep science. New companies are coming up every day, and one of them on this list, in fact, and I'm not telling you which one, might be winning an award later on today. Your problem as an IT manager is, how do you choose which is the best? Because almost certainly you've not done this before, because search tends to have a long shelf life before you discover it really is terrible. So how do you go about choosing which of these 70 vendors might be best for your environment? Not necessarily as enterprise search overall, but looking at particular collections, because there's no reason why enterprise search has to be optimized for every single collection. It can't be done. Some of them need special technology. And this is when it gets interesting, because you have to manage 6 different stakeholders. IT, starting at 2 o'clock on this diagram, they really don't understand search. They probably haven't purchased it before, and they've got a whole bunch of unknown unknowns. When you look at a vendor, they are basically selling on functionality, because how it's going to be used, they have no idea. They'll just say, it will search all your organization's documents at the speed of light. It's blazingly fast, as though speed of search is a determinant in quality of search. And then you have procurement. And one of the things about enterprise search is it's not based on business processes. It's not producing an invoice. It's not checking the storm. It's not finding a CV. So how do you benchmark it against the costs to compare with other applications? And there's going to be a lot of professional services costs in there. When you do search, you basically have to do it with a systems integrator, because most of those companies are quite small. They may only be based in the US. They may not have an operation in Europe, certainly not around, say, South America. So you've got to find a systems integrator. And then when you talk to the line of businesses, if you talk to research and you talk to all those other personas, they'll all have different ways of expressing what they want. And then you've got to have a search support team who probably don't have a great deal of experience about really high-end search. One of the things about search is very rarely have you ever looked at anyone else's search application. They're never shown at conferences, and they don't let you play with it. The challenges I have as a consultant is getting to play with search is quite a challenge. But this is what you are faced with if you're beginning to think your search technology perhaps could be improved. And this is when I really frighten people, because this is how long it takes to find a search application. And on the right-hand side in red is the time in months. So it may take you 2 months to do the requirements. You're going to find the vendors, talk around, prepare a request for information, and then that goes round and round and round, and people have to comment on it. I'm not going to go through each level, other than to highlight the importance of a proof of concept, but it could easily take you 12 months from when you decide that you may want to do something about search to actually just getting the contract. And then you've got to install it. And then you've got to migrate from your old application to your new application. I've just finished earlier this year a project where the company was working in 27 languages in 40 countries. And so migrating that was quite a challenge. Indeed, there was more resource being put into migration than any other aspect, because it had to be seamless. You can't just shut search down and say, oh, we'll come back in a couple of months when it's working. You have to migrate in a live environment, and you have to do it at scale. You can't just say, well, we've done it for the UK's R&D department. It'll be fine for everyone else. Probably not. So it may be 18 months from what I call the journey from vision to satisfaction. That is a huge challenge. And it's one of the barriers to people deciding they want to do anything about search. I don't know where to begin. What am I getting into? How much will it cost? It's very difficult to find out how much enterprise search costs. It's not a particularly big number in terms of licenses. It is a big number in terms of professional services to get it to work. So, this is my look at it over the last 15 years, and no one else has yet managed to beat my forecasts. What I think we have to do if we're going to progress with search is actually not only boost what we have, but I recommend that people explore the technology options all the time. There is a lot of good technology coming out there. There are a lot of new companies. that this should be a parallel process, so that when you find you've reached a plateau with satisfaction, then you are already at maybe the RFI stage in knowing here are 3 or 4 vendors that are going to be able to work with us, and we found a systems integration partner. But this is a lot of strategic thinking has to be done there. And as Katrina was pointing out this morning with her case study, is that out of, what was it, 7,000 people in the company, 5,500 people were using enterprise search. It touches a majority of employees in the company. You can't just, oh, we're just going to do HR, or we're just going to do logistics. Managing an enterprise project of that scale is no mean feat. So let me look a little bit of what I see the future of enterprise search. And it comes down to something that Steve was talking about, and we did not compare notes here. And if Tony and Leaf are looking on, they'll be familiar with this. One size user interface does not fit all. This is a brilliant piece of work that Tony and his colleagues did and published back in 2018. There is an open source version of this, but I'm sure if you're in IRSG, you'll be able to find it easily enough. And on the left-hand side is how legal users, legal professional users, see the relative importance of various features on a user interface compared with healthcare on the right-hand side. And you don't have to look in detail to see these are quite different. For example, in law, no one cares less about acronyms because there aren't any acronyms in law. They'll always write it out in full. In healthcare, it's full of acronyms. So how do you say, this is what we'll do a lot of work in this area, unless you absolutely understand how the UI is going to be used? I like this. This is a PhD thesis from Hugo Herdeman, University of Amsterdam. And I'm not saying this is the perfect UI in any way, but what he does do is identify the elements of a user interface and just say, what is important to be able to be seen? And going back to what Olivia was saying earlier on, frankly, how much clutter is there around there? Can we see our way through the clutter? Is all this stuff around the edge getting in the way? And I think there's a major tipping point now going on. This is a brilliant diagram from Search in the Enterprise. Thank you, Charlie and Udo, because it's a brilliant text. Over from 1980 to 2020, the focus was very much on the index side. And we got a lot of it, NLP, a lot of work on taxonomies. And this is, in a way, what is being sold by the vendors. We can build you a wonderful index. And I think where we have to go is focus on the user experience, the user interface. And going back to the vendors who are lovely people, those 70 people, but very rarely do they ever talk about their user interface. They talk about, we have federated search, it goes across 60 different applications. Yeah, what does it look like on the user interface? And I think we have to start defining our requirements under the personas and how that affects what the user interface is. And from that, define what technology we need in order to deliver that user interface. There's another big issue with indexing, just before I come to the end, is that the big challenge with an index is re-indexing. So any technology advance that requires an enterprise to re-index all of its content is not going to happen. Because just taking 500 million documents, even with parallel processing and cloud applications, takes a very long time. And then you've got to wonder, are there any issues with it? Are there any bugs with it? And think about the amount of heat it's generated in the data center. It's not very climate friendly. But I think we have to simply look at that right-hand side. That is where the progress needs to be made if we're going to cope and improve search satisfaction. So in conclusion, if I'm going to be bold, I think we've got to the stage that indexing technology isn't going to make a huge visible increase in success and satisfaction in the enterprise context. I think smart organizations will start looking increasingly about how transparent the AI application is and whether it matches the corporate AI governance policies. And this is important because corporations are now saying, this is what we expect from AI solutions. Does search match that? And the user interfaces have to enable the user to adapt the UI. So that you can basically drag and drop the components to give you what you want, not be delivered by what the AI thinks your role is. And at the present moment, only arguably 2 or 3 of those 70 vendors enable you to play games with the UI in real time. I think we have to find ways not only of understanding what and how users are searching, but why they are. Why do they forage for information? And I thought that the opening presentation from Katrina this morning was very helpful in understanding, for example, the people search is dominant. How good a job do we do about searching people? I mean, Steve could spell his name with a PH. If you look for Stephen with PH, is the software good enough to find Stephen with a V or Steve rather than Stephen? Searching names is a big challenge. And I think in the end, that delivering a manageable search experience with explainable AI will be the differentiating factor between those vendors. As I say, there are 70 of them. They're all offering the same wonderful technology, but what's the user experience like? And with that, and in general, I'm open to questions. I don't like sharing my own presentations, but luckily I've managed to stop in time. So, anyone got anything to say? If I can. Anything? Right. Sorry, I'm just opening up my. I've lost everyone.
That was great.
Okay, Udo, thank you. Oh, sorry, I lost my Zoom screen.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, questions. I can see one from Tim. Tim Collins.
Can I make the technology work? Hi, Martin. Nice to see you as usual. And thank you for organising all of this. I'm going to push your date of earliest. I reckon I can point to search technology that was in place in parts of the UK, probably back in 14th or 15th century. It may not have run on a computer, but actually it was finding, it was legal documents for lawyers in the law courts of Henry VIII and or before. So this is a game, and it has been life and death, quite literally, for all of that time.
I would agree with you, Tim. That's why you're at the National Records. I mean, we all things like notations in margins, which we do now on Word. Notations in encyclopedias were fundamental to 15th and 16th century knowledge share.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There's nothing new in this world, but thank you for your comment. And yeah, I'd actually be interested in that reference. Yeah, I, of course, copyright Tim Collins.
The precise date of record, which set of records you might be looking at. Basically, medieval courts knew how to find stuff is the message.
Okay. Ingo, you had a comment.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for your talk. When I listen to you, it's very interesting what you said about yeah, the index was important so far, and now it's more the UX, etc. Sometimes, as coming from the more system-oriented side of things, I have this feeling that am I redundant now? Do you have something encouraging to say for people who still work on relevance models and these kind of things, or should we just go into HCI?
I think I asked I was deliberately pushing a point. I'm trying to get the balance between, if you like, creating the index and using the index. And I think that from a technical perspective, from a vendor technical perspective, there are selling ways of bringing the stuff into the index and then pushing it out by AI on the basis that AI can read our minds. And I'm just saying, I think the user has such a range of requirements that if we look at what their requirements are, we may develop the technology in different ways and more helpful ways.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. So I think
there's room for you yet, Inga.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. You just saved my day. Yeah, good. Thank you.
I would have said there's probably more work to do, even as we start to introduce more personas and custom relevance models and so on. That actually, you know, rather than managing one, you're managing several, and that workload for maintaining that is growing at quite a considerable rate, which is one of the blockers really for going down that road as well. It's the manual work needed to tune and train that is growing just as quick.
Steve, this morning we were talking to Paul about the problems of training people. I mean, from an AstraZeneca perspective, do you find it difficult to find the people you need and the skill sets, not just in the UK, but around the world, to make your vision of a searchable enterprise come to fruition?
Yeah, I'm trying to find people that, I suppose, search engineers and architects and things is really hard. They're a very, seem to be quite a scarce breed, for want of a better. But yeah, and it is really hard. And we're trying to, and the skill set is broadening out. So we're working with other groups across the organisation as well. So data science and information management teams and data engineering to help us wrangle this problem of ingestion and understanding the content.
Yeah.
But yeah, trying to find people that can understand the slightly quirky mindset for being able to get a search engine to work is proving quite hard.
There's a comment from Aaron DeVries about if you let the user choose the UI, that they will lose time tweaking the search compared with inspecting the possible answers. And I think my response to that is it comes down to training. Is that I'm sure before anyone gets let loose on your HR applications, they have to go through a training process to use the HR application or the ER or the logistics program. And I think if you train people, they will search better. You have to put the investment in and keep on making that assessment and keep on making that investment.
I think as well, there's probably an element of having a good UI design. If you've got loads and loads of little widgets, you're having to tweak all these little bits all over the place to make it work.
Yeah.
Users aren't going to be interested. They expect to be able to just go type in one word and expect the engine to just know what you mean. And it sort of comes also perhaps to the mentality between internet search versus the enterprise as well, where you're on if you go onto Google and you can't find what you're after. So as an example, I was trying to find one of the coolant pipes on my car burst. I was trying to find a new one, and it's a rigid metal pipe with a shape. Trying to find someone that sold that version, that pipe for my model of car and so on, and the market cap was really hard. But you can't just go, rubbish, just go and choose from that. You'll try different searches and refine your search, and in the consumer world, we're prepared to do that. If we can't find it, we'll keep looking, or we'll go and have a look, maybe at fast parts or something like that. Yeah. But in the enterprise, as I said, expectation, I didn't find it first time, must be rubbish. And we need to help to educate users that actually you still need to actively search. It's not just a magic silver bullet.
To pick up on your comment about Google, I can surprise people on a regular basis by the fact that Google Scholar has a totally different interface. And it helps me make the point that if Google decided that the academic fraternity needed a different user interface with different search criteria and different layouts, shouldn't you be following Google? You keep on telling me Google's great, so emulate Google. Anyhow, we've come to 1 o'clock. Steve, thank you very much indeed. It's nice to have a real case study with a name attached to it. So thank you to AstraZeneca for letting you take part. And I am going to bring it to a halt there. We have more time. There's an open panel session this afternoon at 4 o'clock, at which we'll be looking back at all the, any questions raised this afternoon. Doesn't mean all the speakers have to hang around, but we can have a good discussion. So for now, thank you very much indeed. And Udo will be picking up the baton at 2 o'clock. My thanks to everyone who has participated this morning and for the questions, and enjoy your lunch. Udo, bye-bye for now.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to ask something, but I think raising a hand is not always the best way. I think the best thing is to type something in. I just wanted to pick up on a point that you made, which was nicely linking to what we heard about earlier. The fact that enterprise search is not really present in academic research persists every time I'm bidding for papers at top conferences, which have hundreds or thousands of submissions. I hardly ever find a paper that is interested in enterprise search. So this divide between industry and academia is not going away. The only people doing something in this area are Google and Microsoft, essentially.
Okay, I shall go and have a well-deserved cup of coffee. My thanks to everyone.
So